Yes, sir.
So, hopefully you didn't come through too much weather.
Well, it seems to have followed.
So, our next presenter is Worshipful Brother Ben Wallace. He is now the Worshipful Master of Sophia Lodge in North Carolina. Their first traditional observance lodge, which is what he's going to be talking about today. So, this should be a very fascinating presentation for us. I think something that we here in Illinois have a lot of interest in, but perhaps don't have a lot of familiarity with. So we're going to power through his presentation, and I'm hoping that along the way you write down some good questions, and we have a really good question and answer period at the end. So we are running a little bit behind, but you know, that's the way these things work, and we'll just kind of keep going. So without further ado, Worshipful Brother Ben Wallace.
Thank you there, fellas. Appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity to come all the way out here to Illinois and speak to you guys, Illinois. I was stationed at Chanute a long time ago for a little while. I was a crash fire rescue guy for the Air Force for a couple of tours, and it looks pretty much just like I remember it. The wind was blowing all the time when I was here, and it was winter just like this. But this is under better circumstances. I enjoyed the military, but I really enjoyed Freemasonry a ton. Appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you guys. I'm kind of a pacer, so I'm using this walk-around microphone. Everybody hear me okay? Mm-hmm. All right, right on. And just as a way of one more introduction, I brought a buddy with me. This fellow sitting over here is Tony Rathbone, and he's two important things. One of them, other than just being my buddy, one of them is he is the master of the second traditional observance lodge in North Carolina, Veritas, which is up in Asheville. We're down in the middle of the state. And he's also the chairman of the Grand Lodge Committee on Masonic Education in North Carolina, and that's really why I brought him. We're doing something else this afternoon with those guys. Anyway, I've come here today to talk to you guys about traditional observance masonry, or observant masonry. These are synonymous terms. And I understand from what the fellows were telling me that observant masonry or traditional observant masonry is outlawed here. Is that right? Or is persona non grata? We don't have it. So, here's the first and most important thing I'm going to tell you. Don't get caught up in the title. Don't get caught, it's just a name, right? It's something that we call a particular flavor of the way of doing things. So what is observant masonry and that's outlawed? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit, but if you wanted to do some of the things that we like to do in observant masonry, that's fine, just don't call it observant masonry. You don't have to call yourself observant masonry. There's no checklist. You know, there's no criteria. There's no traditional observance police that are going to come see if you're doing actual traditional observance stuff to call you. You can call yourself observant masonry in this lodge right here if you want to. Nobody's going to come tell you can't do that. Or you can do observant things and just not call yourself an observant lodge. Either way is cool, right? I think people get caught up on the title too much. All right. Here's some things we're going to talk about today. I'm doing the introduction now. I've got a block called The Siren Song of Observant Masonry. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sophia's story and how we came to create that in North Carolina. I've got a couple of 8 steps to Masonic excellence that we're going to talk about. Pathways and pitfalls, which are things that observant lodges do really well and really poorly, and things that they should and shouldn't be doing. I got some specific checklists, and we're going to wrap it up. And I'm going to try to get you guys back on schedule. Here's what I want you to think about, fellas. I want you to think about the Masonic Lodge. Just forget about this whole observant thing. Just take that out of your mind for a minute. I want you to think about a lodge where you know all the members of your lodge. How many of you are in a lodge that has like a bunch of guys that you never see and don't know, and so-and-so dies, and somebody's like, who's that? Never heard of him, never seen him. Observant masonry generally, and now I'm going to talk in generalities because I told you there's no checklist, right? You can be a big lodge and be an observant lodge, and there are some that are. Generally, and at least in our case in North Carolina, observant lodges are meant to be small. I think we're sitting on 36 or 37 members right now, fixing to raise one Monday night when I get back. But that's a small lodge. I know the name of every man in our lodge. I know most of them's wives, and most of them's kids, you know. So we know these guys. We don't have this problem where we don't know who our members are. One reason I know them is because there ain't that many of them. Another reason I know them is because most of them come to lodge. They're paying a lot of money to be in an observant lodge. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We charge more money than most folks. They love it. They like it. And then, so we have a very good rate of participation. What if everybody in your lodge, you guys are here today, I promise you that every man in this room is here because he loves Freemasonry. And he wants to learn some stuff about Freemasonry. And you take your Freemasonry serious. My home lodge, so Sophia Lodge, just so everybody knows, our traditional observance lodge, we created that later. We're only 5 years old. I've been a Mason for, I think, 11 years now. So I was raised and live in and still attend a place called Blackmer, 127, which is in a little town called Mount Gilead of about 1,200 people. So we're very rural where I'm from. I'm from the country in North Carolina. And we've got, you know, we're the typical lodge. We've got almost 100 folks. We've got 20 guys that show up, and the rest of them we never see, right? Well, those that don't show up, some of them Masonry still means a lot to them. They pay their dues every year. They've been doing it for years. They like what they learn. They like the idea of Freemasonry, but they just don't attend. And they don't maybe take it as serious as I do. They're not going to get on a plane and fly to Illinois and do a program. You know, they're not in all the appendant bodies and do all this stuff. But all the guys, and the guys in my little hometown lodge, sometimes we do pretty good degree work. We do pretty good charity. We do pretty good. We're not a bad lodge. But they don't take it with the same reverence that the guys in the observant lodge do. In my observant lodge, everybody is very serious about their Masonry. They know all their words to all their ritual, right? When we do charity, we do it all out. When we do the lodge experience, we do it all out. So we're like all in. These guys are all in to the whole concept, right? Who doesn't want that in your regular lodge? Of course you want it. You like to know all the members in your lodge, and you like for all your guys to take it serious. So far, everybody in the room is an observant Mason, right? Y'all are traditional observants, so far. Let's see if I can get to some criteria y'all don't like here in a minute. How about if all the guys thought that the opening and closing of the lodge was seen as important to the work that we were about to undertake? So there's a couple of things to doing good ritual. This is both raising your candidates and opening and closing. This is ritual, right? So we talk about the lodge being a sacred space, right? I don't know in your ritual what all words y'all have that talk to this, but I promise you that somewhere in your ritual you're talking about making a sacred space. What does that mean? Oh, that's a big spooky word, sacred space. It means a place where all the guys are coming together and they're like-minded. Yeah, we're all Masons, we're all like-minded. Well, not, I mean with intention. You're intentionally creating a space where everybody's kind of on the same page, and everybody's all in, and everybody's really engaged. And if you create that space, you have to do really good opening ritual. Part of that doing really good opening ritual is getting all your words right. Yeah? Y'all have ritual police here? So I say that affectionately. And so the way North Carolina works is we have a grand ritualist, and then he's got a committee of ritual police, and then they, as you cascade down the management tree, they have district ritual guys, and then they get down to me, which is a guy that's been what we call certified. That means that I can do all the secret work, all the book in the ciphered book. Is y'all's ritual ciphered? It's not ciphered. What do? Mouth to ear? It's what?
Well, there's parts are not. Some parts are not.
Yeah. It's in print?
Yes, in print.
Okay.
Give you one right
Okay,
now.
so that's cool. In North Carolina, it's not. And so all our work is ciphered. And so you learn that from a coach. The coach teaches you. And when you know all the ritual, when you can open the lodge, close the lodge, confer all 3 degrees, do all of the coaching from memory, then you get certified. You have to go to a day where they certify you and stuff. So we have these cascading levels of ritual police. So part of opening the lodge is getting all your words right. And even if you're not a certified lecturer, which a lot of our guys are in observant masonry, because it just kind of draws that kind of fellow. But you don't have to be certified. The important thing is that you learn your ritual and that you get it right. Because here's what happens. The next step is you have to understand what the words mean, and you have to be serious about intentionally trying to do them, creating this space. And you can't do that if you're nervous or if you're trying to remember your words because you don't really know them that well, right? So doing good ritual starts with knowing your words, comes down to wanting to do it right, then doing it with intention, and then you can start to put things like emotion into it, and you know, inflection in your voice, and some acting skills, and it starts to take some life in it. In observant masonry, we do this. Not only our ritual work, but even our opening is very serious and solemn. We do everything at half speed. This is just the way we work in observant masonry, at least in my lodge, and in most of them. You guys take up the signs when you open. Y'all have a part where you do that. And everybody's in here is a master mason? I didn't vet everybody. Is anybody in here not a master mason? Okay, so some of you are not. So when you open the lodge, that's cool. But when you open the lodge, we have signs and we take them up. And sometimes it looks like guys are doing the Macarena. They're doing it really quick, right? Because we got to get through it. And the whole ritual becomes rushed like this. All the words, all the steps, and all the walking that we do, and all the signs that we give. It gets rushed because we can't wait to get the lodge open so we can talk about paying the bills. And reading the correspondence from the Grand Lodge, right? But when you slow it down, it starts to take on a life. Know your words. You know, that's the start. But then slow it down. And then, part of the reason we go so fast is because we're worried about missing a word. And then if we miss a word, we talk even faster because we're just trying to get through it without messing it up, right? But when you know it, and when you're doing it with intention, and when you slow it down, it starts to take life. So all the guys in an observant lodge, at least in my observant lodge, are down with this concept. They understand this. And so when everybody's doing it, I promise you, if you ever see it, it's magical. I mean, it takes on a whole new life. Okay, press on the video. Administrative functions are kept to a bare minimum. So in most lodges in North Carolina, I assume it's the same way here, we open, we talk about the bills we've got to pay, we read all the correspondence, we talk about the upcoming fundraiser. Everybody does all this, right? In observant masonry, we are all about the experience and education. The experience and education. So we try to keep our business to an absolute minimum. So here's what we do. Now, everybody has rules, right? We're going to talk about rules in a minute. But if you're going to be observant masons, you got to play within the rules. You got to know what they are, and you got to play within the rules. Now, you can walk right up to the line of them, right? You can push some boundaries, but stay within the rules, because nothing will get you in trouble like getting outside the rules. So if you have rules about what you have to do, then do that. In North Carolina, we fortunately have the freedom to where when we're a couple of days, maybe a week before our meeting, our secretary will confer with we actually have a go-to meeting. We confer with the master and the wardens, figure out all the stuff that we got to tell our people. He puts it in an email. He emails it to all the members. When we get to this is even like including our budget, all the correspondence, all of that stuff. We try to put that in an email, and we send it to our members. And when we get to that part of the meeting, Brother Secretary, clear your desk. He says, we have a consent agenda. I say, consent agenda. Everybody get it? Everybody got it. Everybody read it? Everybody read it. Are there any questions? And if anybody has a question, then we'll talk about something that was in there. But for the most part, nobody ever does, because they don't want to talk about paying the bills either. And I'll say, I'll entertain a motion to adopt it. Move we adopt the consent agenda. Second, questions. Vote. Carries. Done. Our business is done. That's it. Then we can go on to doing masonry. Then we can get on to doing masonry. Because paying the bills and reading the minutes is not masonry, fellas. It's part of it. But that's, from an observant standpoint, that's not what we're here to do. Wouldn't you like to leave every meeting having learned something? Going away with some bit of knowledge about Freemasonry or about life in general, or something that will make you better. Who doesn't want to do that? So we are very pro-education. We have an education program at every meeting with the exception of the one annual meeting where we have to elect officers and all that. That's our one annual business meeting where we just give up and do the administrative stuff. Other than that, we try to have some kind of education at every meeting. Now, if we're having a degree, we generally don't. We think that the degree is the education portion. But we don't do a lot of degree work. Most observant lodges don't. We're not a degree mill. We're not running tons of guys through because we get to know them before we actually bring them through. But anyway, so we try to have some kind of education in every meeting. Wouldn't everybody like to leave the meeting knowing something that you didn't know when you got there? Right on. And it's okay if you don't, right? Maybe the education's not your thing. Maybe you're in this for the fellowship. That's okay. Do that in your life. There are lodges that do that don't want no education. That's okay. And they just want a fellowship, and that's fine. Go join one of them. But this is what I'm telling you what observant Masons do. Where the ritual work provided the candidate a sense of reverence and awe. I was pretty lucky. I had pretty good degree work at Blackburn, a little home lodge. Wasn't the observant experience, but it wasn't bad. It was pretty good. But most observant Masons have this story. They were initiated, passed, and raised, and it was a bad experience. The guys didn't know their words. It just didn't feel good. You don't have to know the ritual to know when somebody's messing it up. I know good ritual when I see it, even if I don't know the ritual, right? So, when you do that good ritual, the ritual is not about the master or the officers or the members of the lodge. The ritual is about that candidate's experience. You should focus all of your intention and all of your attention on, on that candidate. May have to have water here in a minute, fellas. I think I'm fixing to lose my voice. So, put yourself in the position of being a candidate. And we all experienced some amount of reverence and awe when we had those parts of the ritual. I'll be careful here since we have guys in here that are not haven't done all this. But boy, you left lodge knowing that you had done something profound. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We leave lodge knowing that we did something really important. We don't really know what it was because there's so much information that you take in. But boy, just think if you amped that up even more. And so you left with this real sense of awe and wonder and shock and enlightenment, right? That's what we're all shooting for. So in observant Masonry, hang on here, fellas. 10-second break. Thank you very much. Okay. So in observant Masonry, we put a lot of emphasis when we do degree work on giving that candidate the absolute best experience he can have. And again, I'm going to be a little careful here, but everybody knows that there are certain points in the ritual where you see things in a new light. Yes? Or where you kind of knocked into a new way of looking at things. How's that? Or you're kind of raised up to a new level where you can see things differently.
Funny guy.
Huh?
Funny guy.
So, as awesome as you can make that experience for that candidate, that's what you ought to be doing. Because if you hook him at the beginning, and then you give him something to keep coming back for, that's the way that we'll improve our retention. And all the grand lodges that are so worried about their numbers can retain guys. There's no secret to how to retain them in my mind. We spend lots and lots of time about how we're going to retain our guys, right? How we're going to get more guys. But to observant Masons, the answer is very simple. You give them a profound experience every time they come to lodge. You make them want to be there. If a guy has a bad degree, he may not come back. Or he may come back for a couple of meetings, but if all y'all are doing is sitting around chewing the fat, shooting the breeze, he can do that at home. I'm going to go do something else. At Blackburn, which is a pretty good lodge that I'm still very active in, we're pretty good about having education and doing things, but sometimes we get a little lazy and they don't do it. And you know, if they call, when our phone tree comes out, if they aren't doing anything, I don't go. I don't get to see my family very much because I'm doing this all the time. And I like to go see them when I can. So if they got something going on at Blackburn, I'm there every time. But if they ain't got nothing going on, if they're going to open and pay the bills, they don't need me for that. I don't want to listen to that. Just the way I look at it. And most observant Masons kind of look at it that way too. So, just a review, I'm going to go back. Who in their lodge is not down on all these ideas? Knowing all your members. Where everybody treats the lodge experience reverently. Yeah? Where the opening and closing was seen as being important. Knowing your degree work is important. We do as little administration as we can. We leave the meeting having learned a little something. It doesn't have to be some 45-minute lecture like I'm doing here. It could be 5 minutes, but we try to teach you something every time you come. And where we do really good ritual work for the candidate to try and keep them around. But now we'll stop for a few questions here before we press on. But I'd like to know, is anybody not down with any of these concepts? So maybe you're all observant Masons, you just don't know it. The problem is we talk about every one of these things. I guarantee you guys that are not in observant lodges talk about this very stuff. Oh, we ought to do a better job for our candidates. Oh, I wish we didn't have to do all that doggone business. Y'all talk about it all the time. I know I'm in one of these lodges. We just never fix it, right? We don't fix it. Observant Masons are fixing it in their lodges. Now, here's a very important thing I'm going to tell you. So this observant Masonry thing, this traditional observance thing, this big boogeyman that everybody's afraid of, part of the reason they got this bad reputation before I came along, back in the day when the stuff was getting started, was it's so profound, and the guys that do it love it so much that sometimes their egos get carried away and they think that everybody's Masonry ought to be just like their Masonry. And then they start telling everybody in the lodge that's not doing all this stuff that they're doing it wrong. And that they, the observant Masons, are doing it right. And all you other knuckleheads are doing it wrong. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. So, we're going to talk about that more in just a minute. But this is the way we do it in observant Masonry. We think this is the path to getting Masonry back on its track nationally. But you guys do your Masonry any way you want. I don't want anybody coming to the observant lodges saying, no, y'all don't need to be doing that. Y'all don't need to be dressing like that. Y'all don't need to be charging that much dues. Ain't none of their doggone business. But correspondingly, I can't turn around and go to them and say, oh, y'all ought to be dressing up for lodge. Oh, y'all ought to be charging more dues. Y'all ought to be doing better degree work, right? You can't have it both ways. So I told you I was raised in this little country lodge. My experience wasn't bad. You know, it wasn't spectacular, but it wasn't bad. I know some guys that have some pretty tough times. But I just knew when I finished the degrees, each one of them, that there was something really more profound than what I was getting. We weren't doing much education at Blackburn at the time. I was that guy that came back 2 or 3 times. They didn't really do anything. Sat around and complained about stuff. And went home. And I almost left Masonry over it. I wasn't having a good experience there at the time, which we've changed a lot of that now. Our culture is different. Back in the day when I was raised, we weren't doing anything much. I didn't have time for that, right? I had kids that were, you know, smaller then, that were in school still. I didn't have time. So I knew there was something different, and this leads into a longer story than we have time for, but I was looking for something more. There was back before we had so much Facebook and everything, they used to have like chat rooms and stuff, and Sanctum, anybody know Sanctum Sanctorum? Yeah, it was one of these things that everybody went to, and there were all these Masons from around the country, and they talked a fair amount about observant masonry on there, and esoteric stuff, which I was kind of into. But you know, there were a lot of good Masons there. And I kept hearing about this observant masonry, and you know, this better way of doing things, and you know, this trying to raise ourselves up and do better work and all this stuff. So I was getting really interested, and so just on a whim, I bought an airline ticket and flew to Colorado Springs, Colorado, to Enlightenment 198, which was one of the observant lodges that was really big at the time. They were kind of nationally known, which wound up came back and bit them a little bit. They got a little carried away, but when I walked into that lodge room for their opening, it was a shock and awe experience. It was so profound. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from visitors to Sophia say the same thing. Oh my God, I can't believe it. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. This is what I thought masonry was going to be. That's you get that all the time. This is what I thought masonry was going to be. Because it's kind of when you do this, your ritual rite, when you're doing all this stuff that we've been talking about, it takes on almost a spiritual essence to it. I mean, it feels profound. So that's what happened. So I got to Enlightenment 198. It was fabulous. Absolutely fell in love with the concept. Came back to North Carolina. Started proselytizing for it. Fortunately, I was in a lodge called Wilkerson College Lodge, which was kind of like a research lodge, right? We were an education-based lodge. And so we budgeted for 2 national level speakers a year. We bring in 2 national level guys every year, still do. And they came and did a program for us. So I weaseled my way into being in charge of education in that lodge, and so I was the one that was picking the speakers, and I started getting speakers that were talking about this observant masonry stuff. And so we got Cliff Porter, who's no longer a Mason, but at the time was a big guy for Enlightenment 198, was all over the interwebs talking about observant masonry, and Tim Hogan and Rob Hurd, and a lot of those guys are kind of drifting on now, and got Andrew Hammer to come down. So all these guys are talking about this observant masonry stuff, and it just kind of took hold. I was talking it up everywhere. And Hammer came down and did a program for us, and there was our senior grand warden was there. His name is Doug Caldwell. And now he's a past Grand Master. This was quite a few years ago. So Most Worshipful Brother Caldwell had been in a book club. This is a longer story than y'all want to hear, but he'd been in a book club. They had read Andrew Hammer's book, and so Hammer came to speak, and they came to see him speak. And I don't know if any of you seen Hammer speak. Andrew is a fabulous orator. And so he shucked it right on down to the cob, as Jerry Clare would say back in North Carolina, and gave a great speech, and the guys read the book. And so at the end of the night, Doug Caldwell came over to the table and said, "Ben, why don't we have one of these things here in North Carolina?" And I said, "Oh, I've been waiting on somebody that wears purple to say that for a very long time." We just kind of started on a path. I said, "I'll do it if you'll help." He said, "Yes." I knew we needed some top cover. He was it. And so we formed a steering committee. Most Worshipful Brother Caldwell, Senior Grand Warden at the time, and myself and a couple of other guys, 4 of us started. We started talking and planning and had a whiteboard and started to draw it all out and put meat on the bone. And next thing you know, we're going through this creative process, and we're adding more and more people, and then we get a dispensation. And next thing you know, we've got a lodge. Everybody familiar with Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey cycle? A lot of guys, most of you shaking your head up and down. If not, there's some really cool. He's got several books on this. If you're not a reader, go to YouTube. There's some pretty cool short videos that talk about this whole cycle. It pervades all of society, and it specifically pervades Freemasonry, both for the candidate and for lodges and for grand lodges. I think for all entities that are in a creative process or a recreative process, it follows this pattern a fair amount. You start off with kind of a status quo, and the next thing you know, you're on an adventure. So this is, I have a longer version of this program that I'm doing. I'm going to skip through this pretty quick in the essence of time. But we had a normal status in North Carolina of what masonry was, and lodges that were pretty serious about their masonry. But for the Observant Lodge that we created, we went from a status quo to really we were on a mythic journey to try and create something new and different. And we found mentors along the way, and we had trials and tribulations, and we eventually triumphed over those. And then we have now a new status quo, at least for the Observant Masons in North Carolina. We have a new way, a new standard that we hold ourselves to, not everybody else, but that we hold ourselves to in the lodge experience. Anyway, I do that a little longer sometimes, but trying to get you guys back on track here. That was my time, by the way. Yeah, really. So 8 steps to excellence. So this is kind of rehashing what we were doing before, but here's some big things that Observant Masons do. I was talking in general terms a while ago. We'll talk in some more specific terms. How do you keep your lodge membership if you have a really great lodge down to, in the neighborhood of 40 guys or so? We have a gentleman's agreement that if we get over 60 that we're going to cab it off and create another lodge. But we're not going to get there anytime soon, because one thing you do is guard the west gate. Guarding the west gate is another thing that all lodges, not Observant lodges, just regular old lodges everywhere in America talks about all the time. And we only want to let the right guys in the front door, right? If you get the right guy in the front door, that'll help your retention rate, because you're not getting the guy that was just curious or that wasn't really serious about it. Yeah? The problem is we don't practice that in most lodges. We don't, that ballot box is there for a reason. And if the guy comes and he's the wrong guy, maybe he's not an ethically, morally correct guy. Maybe you don't think he's going to learn his catechism. Maybe he's not philosophically in line with you. Maybe he's just lazy. Maybe he's just in it for business. And on and on and on and on. When we have that guy that we think isn't the right guy, we elect him anyway in most lodges. Right? Why do we do that? Because we're good guys. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. Well, maybe this guy will get better if he's around us. If he's around our greatness, maybe he'll just, through osmosis, maybe he'll get better. But we don't do a good job of guarding the west gate. If you get affiliate members, which we get a lot of in the Observance Lodge, when we created a lodge, we were all affiliate members, right? We were all Masons from somewhere else. We raised a few, but not many. So whether it's a candidate or an affiliate member, maybe you get an affiliate member who comes and you don't think he's going to be a good fit for you. Those are even harder to drop, to drop those guys and not elect them, especially when they think they're really important guys that wear purple, or DDGMs or DDGLs or big muckety mucks in some other appendant body. And the whole world revolves, the Masonic world revolves around them. When they come to you, but you don't think they're the right guy, you have a moral and ethical obligation to your lodge to not elect them to membership. And that makes us look like a bunch of pretentious bad guys. Because all I've got to do is not you petition my lodge and we don't elect you and you're somebody really important, then we're a bunch of bad guys. Oh, those observant guys in their fancy tuxedos and their high dues, thinking they're better than everybody else. Right? But really, we just didn't think you were a good fit for us. We don't want title chasers. We don't want guys that, whatever. I'm not going to get down the road of what is a good fit for us. Because what's a good fit for us and Sophia, it may be a great fit for Tony and them up there, and they're Observant Lodge too. But, every lodge has its own culture. You know who will fit with you and who you don't. But you have an obligation not to elect guys that you don't want. So, we do that. We know. Our guys know. If you don't think he's good for us, don't elect him. So who doesn't like that? Just out of curiosity, who doesn't like that idea? Who thinks I'm wrong? Who thinks, so you think we ought to elect him anyway? I'm not going to be down with the way that you do things. We just don't think that you should elect that guy to let him come in and mess up your collective egregore, to use a
Yeah, but
big
we're not
word.
a college fraternity, we're a university fraternity.
Well, we will just agree to disagree on that. Just the way that we look at it as observant Masons is if we think they're going to disrupt the good thing that we've got going on with our guys, then we don't let them in. If we think they're a candidate that's going to not do their work, or that maybe they're not a good guy, then we don't let them into our lodge. So I respect and appreciate your opinion. We'll respectfully disagree. Okay. Being proficient in Masonic ritual and law. We've talked a lot about Masonic ritual and how being proficient leads to a better experience for both your candidates and your lodge. Masonic law is just knowing your code. So these lodges take a lot of heat, these type of lodges, because they do walk right up to the edge of the rules. In North Carolina, we know that we do that. We always get permission when we know we're pushing a law or a rule to its very limits. But very oftentimes, when you're dealing with things that are edgy, the first answer that you get is not always the correct one. It's easy to call the Grand Secretary's office or your DDGM or a Grand Master or some past master or somebody and say, hey, can we do this thing? We want to do this thing a little differently than it's normally done. Here's the rule. We think that this is within the rule. Is it? And if the first guy says no, you don't want to necessarily. So you have to be careful. You don't want to just jump chain of command and go, make the guy look bad. But just because the first guy says no, if you think he's right, then it's okay to say, well, look, if you don't mind, we're going to kick this up to the next guy up the chain of command, or we're going to ask the Board of Custodians. If you ask your DDGL, district lecturing guy, district ritual police guy, and I use that term affectionately since I am one. If your district guy says, I don't think you ought to do that, then say, well, do you mind if we kick it up to the Board of Custodians, which is the board that oversees all this? And no doesn't always mean no. But you got to know the rules and you got to stay within the rules because nothing will get you in trouble. A lot of guys are mad at you anyway. They don't like you anyway. And so they're looking for some reason to get you in trouble. Plus, you just want to play within the rules, right? We want to move masonry along. We want to push boundaries, but play within the rules. All right. So a commitment to push brethren through the degrees slowly. I don't know about in y'all state. In our state, here's the conversations we have a lot of times. You get a guy, he's learning his catechism from his coach. And again, ours is mouth to ear. We have ciphered word. So, he's with his coach, he's doing pretty good. So he asks the coach, hey coach, how's that kid doing we got the other night? Oh, boy, he's good. He really gets it. He really gets this. He's going to be a good one. I'm going to have him ready to return his catechism in 5 weeks. Well, which is the way that we look at it. We want them to slow down. We want the coaches not only to teach them their words, we want them to teach them what the words mean. So when you're dealing on the entered apprentice degree, you're not only supposed to be teaching him the words, but you're supposed to be teaching him about the concepts of materialism and ego and false self and all of those things that degree talks about. And he's supposed to not master those things, because that takes years and years and years, but at least understand the concepts and try to be working on it. So we try to slow them down. We also ask them to present a paper on what that degree has meant to them, and what they have learned from this, and they present it in the lodge. It's not mandatory because we can't do that by the code, but we ask them to, and all of them do so far. Because we're letting that kind of guy in the front door that we know, they hang around with us for a while before we get them. If they send a petition in, we don't just vote on it the next meeting. We ask them to hang around with us for a little while. Come to some of our functions after lodge. Get to know the guys. We want to know the guy's name. We want to know his wife's name. We want to know how many kids he's got. I want to know what he does for a living. I want to talk to him. I want to make sure that he can have a cocktail without getting mouthy. I want to make sure he doesn't tell dirty jokes at inappropriate times. Which which I ain't got anything against any of that, but there's time and place for everything, right? You just need to get to know a guy, we feel, before you let him in. And if you get to know him a little bit, you're gonna know if he's okay with writing a paper and slowing down. And we tell him, hey, look, we've had guys come to us wanting to join, and we say, hey, look, hope you have a great career as a brother. We just think we're not a good fit for you. Let me introduce you to this guy over in this other lodge that's going to get you through quickly. They're going to push you through. Their dues are less. They don't do as much philosophy and rhetorical discussion and stuff as we do. That's fine. So we try to slow them down, just like we slow down our degree work. The selection and advancement of officers should be by merit alone. In this state, do you guys have pretty much a progressive line in your lodges? So the senior warden's always getting, the next year, getting voted up to be the master, almost always, unless he does something really stupid, right? Or unless he just quits and doesn't want to do it. Yeah, it's pretty much the same way in North Carolina. It's not a rule, but it's kind of expected. You get put in at the bottom of the line, if you play ball, then you're going to advance up through the chairs and you're going to be master. In observance masonry, we feel like the elected positions should go to guys that most deserve it. Here's what we've seen happen in regular lodges. Elected dude, and he seems like the right dude at the time, right? He's really all in, he's showing up, he's doing the stuff. And then somewhere along the line between junior deacon and senior warden, he falls off, right? And he starts not doing as good. Maybe he's not coming as much. Maybe he had a kid. And by the time he gets through the line, this kid's playing t-ball now, and he can't come half the time. Maybe he got divorced somewhere in the middle of all that, and he's now hating on life, and he's got a really bad negative attitude. Whatever. You could play that game for a long time, but just because a guy looks like he's promising 6 or 7 years ago doesn't mean that when it's time to elect him to one of the elected positions that he's still the right guy. So in the observant lodges, we don't have a progressive line. Now, I was senior warden last year and am master this year, but we have had several elections where I was the senior warden for the whole time, 6 years, and we elected different guys up to that position that we thought were better qualified. So, as a matter of fact, I stood up in lodge and just said, hey, look, I'm not ready yet. I've got other stuff going on. Don't elect me to be master. Elect somebody else, and we would. So, just because it's the next guy's turn doesn't mean that you should put the wrong guy in the chair. It's just our opinion. Dressing your best for lodge. Dressing your best for lodge doesn't necessarily mean wearing a tuxedo. It's what we do. We have a dress code. Our officers are in white tie tux. Our members and guests are in black tie tux or a dark suit. If guys show up at our lodge, they pretty much know what's expected. If they show up and they're not in that uniform, then we give them a pass the first time. First time's always a free pass. Don't worry about it, brother. Come on in. Next time, we probably want to wear a dark suit. So far, we haven't had anybody that came back a second time not wearing at least a dark suit. If they do, then they're just flat out disrespecting you, and we'll have to cross that road when we get to it. But we're nice enough. We're not a bunch of jerks about it. We're not like, oh, you can't come in here if you're not dressed right. And we just don't do that. We say, next time, how about wearing a dark suit? It's kind of what we do. And most of them won't to because everybody else is wearing a dark suit. If a brother couldn't afford it, if he would say, hey, look, I really like what you're doing here. I love this kind of masonry. I really want to come. I don't have a dark suit. We'll buy him one. Promise you, we pass the hat and buy the dude suit. But most people, unfortunately, it hadn't been a problem for us. Some observant lodges have a problem with it. Usually that's guys just trying to needle them a little bit. If you're nice to folks will be nice back to you most of the time. Lodge must offer quality assemblies and be ready to pay for them. So our dues are $365 a year. That's $1 a day. It's a lot of money. A lot of money. But it's a cup. If you look at it in this context, it's a cup of coffee a day. Man. Tony, what's y'all's dues? $240. We're small lodge. We rent space. We have plenty of money. Even though we've only been around 5-6 years, we got money. Here's what we do. One, we take that money and we offer a good experience. We fund, Sophia Lodge funds 3 national level speakers a year. 3 times a year, we're flying a dude in on an airplane to come talk to us. They're guys that have written books, guys that we've seen speak around the country, and that provides for a good experience. Every time we have a national level speaker, and a couple of other times a year, we have a harmony that follows. Harmony is where we go to a local restaurant, and we get like a back room. We got a couple of them around town that we use, depending on our crowd size, and that's when we cut loose and have fun. We have prescribed toasts. We sing after every toast. We have a musician that leads our songs, and it's fun, happy, free, fraternal, hang out with your buddies, have a good time, evening. That's covered in your dues. And so the guys are getting some really good experiences after Lodge. They're getting really good experiences in Lodge. And we never, ever, ever, ever fight about, well, are we going to get 100-watt light bulbs or 60-watt light bulbs? You know, those 100-watt light bulbs, they use a lot of power, but you can see better. At my grandma's house, we can't see. We don't do that. Well, we're not trying to save money scrimping on this and that, because we got plenty of it. It's just our theory, and it seems to work for us. Again, I don't care what y'all's dues are. I'm not telling anybody to make their dues $365. Y'all want to keep y'all 60? Fine, do it. It's just the way we do it. Return of a sense of awe to our ceremonies. We talked about this when we were talking about our degree work. You know, just when it has that good feel, we try to provide that all the time. Sonic education at every meeting. So there's a thing called the MRF, the Masonic Restoration Foundation. And they generally are a clearinghouse for all the observant lodges. Now, the observant lodges don't belong to the MRF. The MRF is just a thing. I mean, if you go on there, you'll see my lodge, Tony's lodge being listed on there. But you don't pay dues. You don't sign up to be one necessarily. They got a lot of information about what observant lodges are or can be. They got all sort of checklists and things that observant lodges do. Go check that out all you want. These things came off of there, and there's lots of other stuff on there. So if you're interested in that, go check out their website. The MRF, when it got started, was before I came around. So in no way do I speak for them at all. They do have a national symposium every year. We generally try to go, some of the guys from North Carolina. I understand that back in the day, they tried to make it a sanctioning body, which got them in a lot of trouble with a lot of the Grand Lodges, because the Grand Lodges didn't want somebody else sanctioning observant lodges in their grand jurisdictions. I think all that went horribly wrong, and they don't do that anymore. So, but it's taken them a long time to get over that stigma. And you know, in their defense, I don't think they were trying to take over anything. They were just trying to have a way to certify observant lodges, and that turned out to be a really bad idea. Anyway, all that's gone away. Pathways and pitfalls. Know yourself and have an identity. So know who you are, and don't be ashamed of it, and live it. Slow everything down. We talked about that. You must deliver what you profess to be. So here's what you can't do, fellas. You can't have your big high views and your big fancy tuxedos and professing to slow everything down and do everything right and be this really cool, spiritual, magical, wonderful experience for guys, and then not deliver it. Guys show up and you do your opening ritual just like every other lodge does, and it's not special. And guys are like, what's that all about? It does make you a bunch of pretentious rascals if you aren't doing what you say you're going to do. Learn the rules in your grand jurisdiction. I cannot emphasize, I've said it about 5 times now, play within the rules. A lot of observance lodges tend to get outside the rules. They get carried away with themselves. They're just like folks. Lodge is just like people. And people sometimes think they're more important than they are. Don't think you're more important than everybody else, and play by the doggone rules. Observance lodges sometimes forget that lesson. Form a relation with your custodians of your ritual. Ours are called the Board of Custodians. Everybody has some kind of ritual police in your grand jurisdiction. When you come to an observance lodge, everything that we do in North Carolina is exactly by the book in the lodge, in the ritual, but it's completely different than anything you've ever seen. Part of that is feel. Part of that is intention. Part of that is this slowing it down and doing it right, really squaring all your corners and dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's. But we do some things a little different than most lodges do. If it doesn't say you can't do it, then we do some of those things. We use incense. It doesn't say anywhere in ritual that you can use incense. It doesn't say that anywhere in ritual, but it doesn't say you can't. Right? So before we started doing that, we went to the ritual police. Hey, we want to use incense. Can we do that? Well, nobody ever did. Nobody does that. Can we do it? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. It was a longer conversation than that. You know, we use real candles. Not all lodges, some lodges do that in North Carolina, but not all. And we use a lot of candles, a lot. So we have the 3 that we use when we're doing that part of the ritual. But we have probably 60 candles burning in the lodge when we do it. It gives it a real cool, great effect. We use beeswax. It smells of beeswax in there. But it doesn't say that we can do that in ritual. It doesn't say we can't. But before we just did it, which would freak everybody out, we asked if we could. Right? Play within the rules. Talk to your board of custodians. You'd be surprised what they'll let you do if you go to them with a good, well-reasoned out argument. Know the rules of what, or the words, we call this the red work on our part, the motions and stuff. Just generally, this is not a place where forgiveness is easier than permission. In this case, if you're going to do something squirrely on your degree that you think is within the rules but barely, or it's different from your culture, get permission first. Work within the rules. Observant masonry is not better masonry. So, you guys have, what's the motorcycle club for masons?
Widow's Sons.
Widow's Sons. So me and Tony both ride Harleys. We're motorcycle guys. A long time ago, when they were getting big, when I was just a baby mason, they wanted to come to North Carolina, and the Grand Master at the time said, no, we're not going to have them here. We don't have clubs in North Carolina. We have a rule in our code that no Masonic clubs in North Carolina. So what they did do, because they liked the idea, was they formed lodges. So there's motorcycle lodges in North Carolina. There's 3 of them, I think. And so it's a motorcycle-based culture in that lodge. And they wear leathers, and they have a thing that says Knights of Solomon. They have a patch, and they ride motorcycles, and they do great charity work. But that's their thing, right? It's their thing. We have education-based lodges, and their thing is education. If you join that lodge, you know you're going to get a double, triple dose of education. They write papers, and they do symposiums and all that stuff, and that's all cool, and we're observant lodges. And then there's plain old regular lodges. I've said it about 5 times now, but I tell, our mantra when we started Sophia was, our masonry is not better than everybody else's, it's just different. It's our culture, just like the motorcycle lodges. And the motorcycle lodges were our best friends, because when we started wearing tuxedos and charging really big dues and having all these candles and incense and all this stuff, they were the very first ones to start to complain about it a little bit. And we talked to them and said, look, we support your right to require all your guys to have a motorcycle. It's not really a requirement, but you can't hardly be in the motorcycle lodge if you don't have a motorcycle. And wear your leathers. They wear their leathers when they open and close and stuff. And do all your motorcycle stuff. We're going to support that because that's what y'all do. All we ask is the same respect. And they became our best friends. And now they understand that a lodge has its own culture, and that's what it is. Just don't ever tell anybody that their masonry is wrong, because it's not wrong. Be humble. Be humble. We're doing all these really great, cool things. We love this style of masonry too much sometimes, almost. But you know better than anybody else. Your experience might be better fitting for you, but that doesn't mean that your lodge is better than another lodge, or you're better than another brother. The MRF has all these specific checklists. In the essence of time, we're going to skip all this, but these are generally things from my little clicker. These are generally things that all observant lodges kind of sort of do. I think we've talked about most of them, except for that one right there.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's going to come up in questions and answers, so I'm going to let it ride for right now. I actually developed this program at one time to teach guys how to do an observant lodge. I think we talked about just about all of this. Yeah, don't fight. Don't fight. Don't fight. If somebody tells you you can't do something, just say, okay. I mean, if it's somebody that wears purple, the board of custodian says, hey, you can't do this thing, or the grandmaster says you can't do this thing, just say yes, sir, and go on, and do something else. Don't knock it till you try it. How many of you have actually sat in an observance lodge? What'd you think?
Well, I love it, and being a member of it, it's hard that well, and it'll bring up in COR, it's the experience that I was looking for in Illinois, and like you, I joined a regular lodge, started getting around, I heard Nye go back too, that was my first one, was enlightenment, so I got to see him in Porter, and go out there and like, this, to me, was masonry. This is what I thought we should be doing. So I held a symposium in 2012, had Mangelli come out from New York, had Erg, and this was stuff, and that's what really changed the culture in our lodge. And we try to be observant as well as we can in Illinois.
Right.
Because we're not allowed to have the chamber. So.
We'll come back to the chamber in just a minute. So, most worshipful brother Bryant Webster, past grandmaster a couple years ago, is in Tony's lodge, is a member of, and a proponent of observant masonry. And he said that he was traveling all over the country doing these grandmaster events, you know, and a lot of states were down on observant masonry. Oh, we don't allow that in our state. We don't have that. And most worship would always ask them, well, what don't you like about it? Well, we just don't, they didn't really know. They just knew they didn't like it. Sometimes they had a specific reason. A lot of times they didn't. And he would always ask them, well, have you been to one? Oh, no, I haven't been to one. Well, you know, don't knock it till you try it. Maybe you'll hate it just as much. If you hate it, then you may hate it even more after you go to it. But at least give it a shot. It's only weird the first time, fellas. Every situation will be different. Every grand jurisdiction has their own rules, so be sure and follow them. The major things and checklists are arbitrary. All this stuff I was talking about, candles and incense and hot views and tuxes and all that. Again, anybody can be an observant. The motorcycle lodges could call themselves an observant lodge if they want. It would be just fine. Don't get hung up on the term. Don't confuse the symbol for the thing symbolized. All the good stuff is done on the down low. Keep controversial stuff private. Right? We'll talk about that in a minute. Remember to have fun and love your brothers. Masonry is about improving yourself, and a lot of that is the people that you hang out with. In a lodge, an observant, from the observant stance, should be a hive of brothers that are kind of all on the same wavelength, that get along, that like each other, that work together, that have the same goals, that believe in the same philosophies. So remember to just slow down and love your brothers. We get so caught up sometimes in the administrative part of Freemasonry and all the things that we've got to go to, and the ritual things that we got to go to, and the charity that we wind up doing, don't have to do, but naturally are led to do. Sometimes all that gets in the way of just loving the guys that are around you. All right, questions and answers. I'll answer this. Who wants to ask about the chamber first?
Here I will. What's the chamber?
So the chamber of reflection is a place where you put a candidate prior to him taking the degree to sit and think about what's going to happen. He's supposed to, when we put them in the chamber, we tell them that what we want them to do is sit in there and think about their relationship with themselves and with their God. We just want you to sit in here and think about your relationship with yourself. Think about who you are. Who are you really? Who you want to be? And your relationship with your God. That's all we want them to do. Sit there and clear their mind a little bit and think about that. Now, in North Carolina, again, everybody has their own rules. Play by your own rules. In North Carolina, when we brought this up to the Board of Custodians, we said, here's the way we pitched it. We said, we believe that the official standard of work, our ciphered ritual that tells us all of our stuff about our ritual, begins with a hammer drop and ends with a hammer drop. It doesn't say anything about what we can do on next Wednesday night when we're not in lodge. But when I go home, I can read any book I want, join any organization I want, I'll be in any church I want. You know, that's outside of the official standard of work. Yeah, that's right. So when we're getting ready to initiate a candidate, when exactly does y'all's purview pick up? They said at the hammer drop. Fine. So prior to that, if we wanted to have a guy sit in a room and just kind of quietly reflect and maybe be meditative or maybe prayerful or just think about things, could he do that? Well, we don't see why not. Okay, well, good, we'll do that. So we're just going to ask him to sit quietly in a room and kind of think. Okay. And that's all we really asked him. So we didn't ask him what we could put in the room with him. They didn't ask us what we were going to put in there. So everybody has a different way of doing this chamber. I'll tell you the way that we do it at Sophia. For our first degree candidates, they get a candle and a mirror, and that's it. A chair, a table, a candle, and a mirror. They're supposed to look at themselves because they're thinking about themselves and God. And they have a candle in there so that they're not sitting in the pitch black, dark. And there's the candle just kind of is the flame that is the inner part of us that Masonry teaches us about. Pretty simple. Kind of, and the candle kind of harkens it back to the old timey days, right? The second degree, when they're getting ready to do that, then we put the emblems of the second degree. So since we have some guys in here that are not Master Masons, there's only a couple of them. The wages of a Master Mason is what I'm talking about. Everybody knows what the wages of a Master Mason is. So we have those in some little glass vials. We sit that in there with them, and then they're going to see that in a few minutes. And then when they get ready to do the Master Mason's degree prior to that, they're in there, and we ramp up the symbology. And we add only things that are in ritual, though. Only the things that are in ritual. So and we actually had a longer discussion with the ritual police than this, but they pretty much said, we'll be okay with y'all doing this if you will keep it Masonic. Keep only the symbols of Masonry that you're showing those guys. Don't do tarot cards and ravens and don't get out of bounds. If you use the symbols of Masonry, we think we'll be okay with that. Now that was a private conversation. Here's the thing about the chamber, at least in North Carolina that I think. If you will keep it off social media, and if you'll not be bragging about it and showing it and trying to make spooky pictures of it and telling everybody that they ought to be doing it, and keep it on the down low, it'll be just fine. Now some lodge, I promise you, we're just fine with the chamber in North Carolina. If some lodge next week decides they're going to use one, and they start putting all sort of stuff that's not Masonic in it, and they start putting it all over Facebook, and they start telling everybody how they ought to do it, it ain't going to be long, we ain't going to have no chambers of reflection in North Carolina. So far, we kept it on the down. Am I out of time? Oh, I'm over. Okay. Any other questions about the chamber? Because this seems to be everybody's hot topic. Okay? Right on. Any questions in general? Well, right on, fellas. I must have covered it pretty good. I'd like to, on behalf of Speed Hallman, the Grand Master of Masons in North Carolina, fraternal greetings, and thank you for letting us come out here and share a little bit of what we're doing there with you. And appreciate the time. It looks like we're fixing to have maybe some lunch or something. Thank you.